The winter of 1847 descended upon Belle Grove Plantation in Virginia's Shenandoah Valley like a shroud, bringing with it the kind of bone-deep cold that seemed to settle into the very souls of the 200 enslaved people who called this limestone estate their prison. Among them moved Sarah, a woman of 35 whose gentle hands had delivered babies, mended broken bones, and eased the suffering of countless souls during her 2 decades of bondage. Sarah possessed a knowledge that made her both invaluable and dangerous. The ancient wisdom of African healing that her grandmother had whispered to her in the slave quarters during stolen moments of her childhood. She knew which roots could stop a fever, which leaves could ease a woman's labor pains, and which powders could send a man into eternal sleep. This is the story of the most calculated act of resistance in Belle Grove's history. Make sure you're subscribed because what Sarah accomplished on Christmas night would change everything. The Height family had owned Belle Grove since 1783, transforming it into one of Virginia's most profitable grain and livestock operations through the brutal labor of enslaved Africans. By 1847, the plantation was under the management of 6 overseers whose cruelty had become legendary throughout the county, men who wielded whips like other men wielded handshakes, who counted a day without bloodshed as a day wasted. Thomas Whitmore served as head overseer, a man whose pale eyes held no warmth and whose voice never rose above the level needed to issue commands that sent grown men scrambling in terror. Under him worked 5 assistants: James Morrison, who took particular pleasure in separating families as punishment; William Thompson, who had personally branded more than 50 enslaved people with his initials; Robert Hayes, who forced women to work in the fields just days after giving birth; Samuel Porter, who rationed food as a tool of control; and David Crawford, whose specialty was psychological torture through arbitrary rule changes. These 6 men controlled every aspect of life at Belle Grove with an iron precision that made their authority seem absolute. They determined when people could marry, when they could visit family on neighboring plantations, and even when they could mourn their dead. Their power appeared unquestionable, until Sarah began to plan their destruction. Sarah's cabin sat at the edge of the slave quarters, a modest structure that served as both her home and her healing sanctuary. The walls were lined with jars containing dried herbs, roots, and powders that she had collected during years of careful gathering. To most eyes, these appeared to be simple folk remedies, the tools of a plantation healer tending to her community's medical needs. But hidden among the healing herbs was something far more dangerous: white arsenic powder that Sarah had painstakingly collected over months of careful acquisition. A pinch taken from rat poison here, a small portion purchased from a traveling peddler there, each acquisition so small as to arouse no suspicion, yet collectively forming a cache deadly enough to eliminate every overseer on the plantation. The plan that began forming in Sarah's mind during the autumn of 1847 was born not from sudden rage, but from years of calculated observation. She had watched these men destroy families, break spirits, and crush hope with the methodical precision of soldiers conducting a campaign. Now she would conduct her own campaign, one that would use their arrogance and comfort against them. Christmas had always been a time when the plantation's rigid hierarchy softened slightly, when even the overseers allowed themselves to believe in the fiction of benevolent paternalism that many slaveholders used to justify their brutality. It was the one night of the year when the 6 men gathered together in the overseer's house for a communal meal, their guard lowered by tradition and whiskey. Sarah understood that this gathering represented her only opportunity to eliminate all 6 men simultaneously. Any other approach would leave survivors who could identify her and ensure her capture. But Christmas dinner offered the perfect combination of opportunity and cover, a moment when their deaths could appear to be either accident or divine retribution. To understand the depth of Sarah's resolve, one must understand the journey that brought her to this moment of calculated rebellion. Born into slavery at Belle Grove in 1812, she had spent her entire life watching the systematic destruction of everything she held dear by the very men she now planned to kill. Her earliest memory was of her grandmother, Kibibi, whose African name meant Little Lady, and who had arrived at Belle Grove in chains during the 1780s. Kibibi had been a healer in her homeland, knowledgeable in the properties of plants and the mysteries of the human body. Despite the attempts of slaveholders to strip away African culture, Kibibi had managed to preserve and pass down crucial knowledge about medicine and survival. Child, Kibibi had whispered to young Sarah during long nights in their shared cabin, "They can chain our bodies, but they cannot chain what lives in our minds. Remember everything I teach you, for knowledge is the only weapon they cannot take away." CTA moment. Sarah's grandmother gave her more than healing knowledge, she gave her the tools for the perfect revenge. Don't forget to hit that like button as we explore how traditional African medicine became a weapon of resistance. Under Kibibi's guidance, Sarah learned to identify dozens of plants by sight, smell, and touch. She discovered which roots could induce labor in pregnant women, which leaves could stop bleeding from whip wounds, and which berries could ease the pain of broken ribs. But her grandmother also taught her darker knowledge, which mushrooms could cause hallucinations, which seeds could induce vomiting, and which minerals could stop a human heart. Some knowledge, Kibibi had explained, is like fire. It can warm your home or burn down your enemy's house. The choice of how to use it will someday be yours alone. That choice came sooner than either of them had expected. When Sarah was 15, Overseer Thomas Whitmore decided that Kibibi was too old to be useful in the fields, but too knowledgeable to be allowed to continue practicing medicine among the enslaved population. His solution was characteristically brutal. He sold Kibibi to a sugar plantation in Louisiana, a death sentence disguised as a business transaction. Sarah watched her grandmother disappear down the road in chains, never to be seen again. That night, alone in her cabin, she made a vow that would shape the next 20 years of her life. Someday, somehow, she would make the overseers pay for every cruelty they had inflicted upon her people. Over the following years, Sarah established herself as the plantation's healer, carefully cultivating a reputation for skill and discretion that made her indispensable to both the enslaved community and the white family. She delivered the babies of enslaved women, tended the injuries of field hands, and even occasionally treated minor ailments among the overseer families when called upon. This medical practice provided perfect cover for her true purpose, learning everything possible about the men who controlled Belle Grove. She memorized their eating habits, their schedules, their personal relationships, and their vulnerabilities. Every house call became an intelligence-gathering mission, every conversation a chance to learn something that might prove useful. She discovered that Thomas Whitmore suffered from stomach problems and regularly consumed large quantities of milk to ease his discomfort. James Morrison had a sweet tooth and never refused dessert. William Thompson drank heavily and often ate little during meals, relying on alcohol for sustenance. Robert Hayes was diabetic and carefully monitored his food intake. Samuel Porter was always the first to try new dishes. David Crawford had weak kidneys and drank water constantly. Each piece of information was carefully catalogued and stored away for future use. Sarah understood that revenge was a dish best served cold, and she was prepared to wait as long as necessary for the perfect opportunity. That opportunity came in the form of a tradition that the overseers had maintained for nearly a decade, their Christmas dinner gathering. Every December 25th, the 6 men would meet in the head overseer's house for an elaborate meal, complete with imported wines, specialty dishes, and expensive delicacies that demonstrated their elevated status on the plantation. The meal was prepared by enslaved cooks working under Sarah's supervision, as her medical knowledge made her the natural choice to oversee food preparation and ensure that everything was safe for consumption. This responsibility gave her unprecedented access to the food and drink that would be served to all 6 targets simultaneously. As December 1847 approached, Sarah began the delicate process of acquiring and preparing the weapons that would deliver justice to Belle Grove's 6 overseers. Arsenic, known in that era as White Death for its colorless, tasteless, and odorless properties, had become the poison of choice for those seeking untraceable murder. The mineral was readily available throughout Virginia in 1847, sold openly in general stores as rat poison and insecticide. Sarah's challenge was not obtaining arsenic, but acquiring sufficient quantities without arousing suspicion. Her solution demonstrated the same methodical patience that characterized every aspect of her plan. Over a period of 4 months, Sarah made small purchases from different merchants in Winchester, Strasburg, and other nearby towns. She never bought more than a small amount at any single location, always claiming to need rat poison for the slave quarters. Her reputation as Belle Grove's healer provided perfect cover for these acquisitions. Who would question a medical practitioner's need for various chemicals and compounds? Sarah spent months perfecting her poison blend with the precision of a chemist. Make sure you're subscribed to see how she turned household products into instruments of perfect revenge. But Sarah understood that simply poisoning food would not be sufficient. Arsenic had a distinctive metallic taste that could be detected by careful eaters, and its effects, while ultimately fatal, took time to manifest. She needed to mask the taste while ensuring that all 6 overseers consumed lethal doses simultaneously. Her solution drew upon both African traditional medicine and European culinary techniques. She would use strong flavors and alcohol to mask the taste of the poison, while employing multiple delivery methods to ensure that each target received a fatal dose regardless of their individual eating habits. The Christmas dinner menu that Sarah planned was a masterpiece of calculated murder disguised as holiday celebration. The meal would begin with mulled wine, heavily spiced with cinnamon, nutmeg, and cloves to mask any metallic taste from the arsenic. The wine itself would be imported Madeira, expensive enough to ensure that the overseers would consume it enthusiastically. The main course would feature roasted turkey with arsenic-laced gravy, ham glazed with poison honey, and sweet potatoes candied with arsenic-infused sugar. Each dish was designed to deliver poison through different flavor profiles, ensuring that even the most cautious eater would consume a lethal dose. But Sarah's most ingenious touch was the dessert course: individual servings of syllabub, a traditional English dessert made with wine, cream, and sugar. Each serving would contain a precisely measured dose of arsenic, sufficient to kill a grown man within hours. The sweet, rich flavor would perfectly mask the poison, while the individual portions would allow Sarah to ensure that each overseer received exactly the dose she intended. The preparation of these poisoned dishes required weeks of careful work. Sarah tested various combinations of arsenic and food, using small amounts on plantation rats to determine the most effective delivery methods. She practiced her cooking techniques until she could prepare each dish with the speed and efficiency that would be required on Christmas Day. During this period, Sarah also had to maintain her normal duties as plantation healer while showing no sign of the murderous plan she was developing. She continued to treat the minor ailments of her fellow enslaved people, delivered 2 babies, and even tended to overseer James Morrison when he suffered a minor injury in early December. This interaction with Morrison proved particularly valuable, as it allowed Sarah to observe his current health status and confirm her dosage calculations. Morrison was a large man with a strong constitution. He would require more poison than his colleagues to ensure a quick death. The psychological toll of planning 6 murders, while maintaining the facade of a dutiful slave, was enormous. Sarah found herself waking in the middle of the night, heart pounding with anxiety about the countless details that could go wrong. She worried about being discovered, about surviving witnesses, about the inevitable retaliation that would follow the overseers' deaths. But whenever doubt threatened to overwhelm her resolve, Sarah would remember her grandmother's face as she was led away in chains, or recall the screams of women being whipped in the fields, or think of the children who had been sold away from their mothers. These memories strengthened her determination and reminded her that the 6 overseers had forfeited any claim to mercy through their own actions. December 25, 1847, dawned cold and clear at Belle Plantation, with frost covering the ground like a white shroud that seemed to foreshadow the events that would unfold before the day ended. Sarah rose before dawn, as she had every day for 20 years, but this morning carried a weight of anticipation that made her hands tremble slightly as she dressed. The Christmas dinner was scheduled to begin at 6 o'clock in the evening, giving Sarah an entire day to complete her final preparations. She moved through the plantation's kitchen with a calm efficiency that had made her indispensable, supervising the other enslaved cooks while secretly adding her deadly ingredients to each dish. The mulled wine was prepared first, heated slowly in a large copper pot while Sarah stirred in the traditional spices along with carefully measured doses of arsenic. The poison dissolved completely into the dark liquid, leaving no trace of its presence except for a slightly metallic aftertaste that would be attributed to the wine's vintage. This Christmas dinner would become the most deadly meal in Virginia's history. Hit that notification bell to make sure you don't miss how Sarah executed her perfect plan. As afternoon approached, the other dishes began to take shape under Sarah's watchful eye. The turkey was basted with arsenic-laced drippings, the ham glazed with poison honey, and the sweet potatoes mashed with arsenic-infused butter. Each addition was made with the precision of a chemist measuring laboratory compounds, though to any observer Sarah appeared to be simply preparing an elaborate holiday feast. The syllabub desserts required the most delicate work, as each individual serving needed to contain exactly the right amount of poison. Sarah prepared 6 portions in crystal glasses borrowed from the main house, each containing enough arsenic to kill within hours but not so much as to cause immediate symptoms that might alert the other diners. By 5 o'clock, the feast was complete and ready for transport to the overseer's house. Sarah arranged for the dishes to be carried by other enslaved people while she personally transported the wine and desserts, ensuring that her poison preparations would not be accidentally consumed by innocent victims. The overseer's house buzzed with anticipation as the 6 men gathered for their annual Christmas celebration. Thomas Whitmore, as head overseer, played host to his colleagues, all of whom had dressed in their finest clothes for the occasion. The atmosphere was one of masculine camaraderie and satisfied brutality. These were men who took pride in their ability to control other human beings through fear and violence. Sarah served the meal with the same quiet efficiency she had displayed for years, moving among the diners like a shadow while they consumed their poisoned feast. She watched James Morrison take his first sip of mulled wine and nod approvingly at its flavor. She saw William Thompson heap his plate with turkey and gravy. She observed Robert Hayes carefully selecting portions of each dish, unaware that his caution was meaningless when everything contained arsenic. The conversation flowed as freely as the wine, with the overseers sharing stories of their most effective punishments and debating techniques for maintaining discipline among the enslaved population. They spoke of human beings as if discussing livestock, analyzing the most efficient methods for extracting labor while minimizing upkeep costs. The key, Thomas Whitmore declared, gesturing with his wine glass, is to break their spirit early. Once they understand that resistance is futile, they become much more manageable. Sarah continued serving in silence, her face betraying nothing of the rage that burned in her chest as she listened to these men discuss the systematic destruction of human dignity, as if it were a matter of agricultural technique. The syllabub desserts were served as the evening's climax, each man receiving his individual portion with obvious pleasure. Samuel Porter, true to form, was the first to begin eating his dessert, consuming nearly half of it before the others had even lifted their spoons. As the meal concluded and the overseers settled back in their chairs with satisfied expressions, Sarah began clearing the dishes with the help of other enslaved people. Her part in the evening's entertainment was officially over, but her real work was just beginning. Within an hour, the arsenic would begin to take effect. The first symptoms would be mild, slight nausea, perhaps a headache that the overseers would attribute to the wine. But these initial discomforts would quickly progress to violent vomiting, severe abdominal pain, and ultimately death. Sarah returned to her cabin and waited, listening for the sounds that would signal the success of her plan. She did not have to wait long. The first scream pierced the cold Christmas night at approximately 8:30, shattering the peaceful quiet that had settled over Belle Grove plantation. Samuel Porter, who had consumed his syllabub dessert most enthusiastically, was the first to experience the full effects of Sarah's carefully calculated poison. Within minutes, the overseer's house had transformed from a scene of comfortable celebration into a tableau of agonizing death. One by one, the 6 overseers began experiencing the violent symptoms of arsenic poisoning, uncontrollable vomiting, severe abdominal cramping, and a burning sensation in their throats that no amount of water could ease. Thomas Whitmore, despite his experience and authority, found himself as helpless as his colleagues in the face of Sarah's chemical assault. His usual commanding presence disintegrated as he doubled over in pain, calling frantically for medical assistance while his body violently rejected the poison he had consumed. The most powerful men at Belle Grove were reduced to helpless victims in a matter of hours. Share this video to help preserve this incredible story of resistance and justice. News of the overseer's mysterious illness spread quickly throughout the plantation, creating a mixture of fear and barely concealed hope among the enslaved population. While no one dared speak openly of their satisfaction, the subtle changes in posture and expression among the field hands and house servants revealed their true feelings about their tormentor's suffering. Sarah moved through this chaos with the same calm demeanor she had always maintained, playing her role as the plantation's healer by offering assistance to the dying men while secretly ensuring that her poison had achieved its intended effect. She examined each overseer with professional thoroughness, pronouncing their condition serious while privately calculating how much longer each would survive. Dr. William Patterson, the local physician who served Belle Grove and neighboring plantations, arrived near midnight in response to frantic messages from the main house. His examination of the 6 overseers confirmed what Sarah already knew: all were suffering from severe poisoning, though he could not immediately identify the specific toxin responsible. "I've never seen symptoms quite like these," Dr. Patterson confided to plantation owner James Height III, who had rushed back from Richmond upon receiving word of the crisis. The onset was too rapid for contaminated food, yet too delayed for most common poisons. "We may be dealing with something more sophisticated." Sarah listened to this conversation from the shadows, recognizing that Dr. Patterson's medical knowledge posed a potential threat to her plan. If he identified arsenic as the cause of the poisoning, suspicion would inevitably fall upon someone with access to both the poison and the food, namely, the plantation's cooks and medical practitioners. Despite Dr. Patterson's efforts, the overseer's conditions continued to deteriorate throughout the night. By dawn on December 26th, 3 of the 6 men had died: Samuel Porter, James Morrison, and David Crawford. The remaining 3, while still alive, were clearly dying, their bodies too damaged by the arsenic to recover. The plantation owner, recognizing the catastrophic impact that losing all 6 overseers would have on Belle Grove's operations, began making desperate arrangements to maintain order among the enslaved population. He sent messages to neighboring plantations requesting the loan of experienced overseers, while simultaneously ordering increased security measures to prevent any potential uprising. These precautions revealed the deep fear that the overseers' deaths had instilled in the white population. While they could not yet prove that the poisonings were deliberate, the timing and comprehensive nature of the attack suggested organized resistance rather than accidental contamination. By December 27, the remaining 3 overseers had joined their colleagues in death, bringing Sarah's plan to complete fruition. 6 men who had wielded absolute power over 200 enslaved people just 3 days earlier were now cold corpses awaiting burial in the plantation cemetery. The investigation that followed was both intensive and ultimately futile. Dr. Patterson's post-mortem examinations confirmed arsenic poisoning, but identifying the source and method of delivery proved impossible given the sophistication of Sarah's approach. The use of multiple delivery methods and the destruction of evidence through normal kitchen cleanup meant that investigators could find no definitive proof of deliberate poisoning. Suspicion naturally fell upon the enslaved population, particularly those involved in food preparation and medical care. Sarah found herself questioned repeatedly by local authorities, but her reputation for competence and loyalty, combined with the lack of physical evidence, protected her from serious accusation. The psychological impact on Belle Grove's enslaved community was profound. While none dared celebrate openly, the death of all 6 overseers had fundamentally altered the plantation's power dynamics. The temporary overseers brought in from neighboring plantations lacked intimate knowledge of Belle Grove's routines and personalities, creating opportunities for small acts of resistance that would have been impossible under the previous regime. The aftermath of the Christmas poisonings extended far beyond Belle Grove Plantation, sending ripples of fear and speculation throughout Virginia's slaveholding community. The death of 6 experienced overseers in a single night represented an unprecedented act of resistance that challenged fundamental assumptions about the control and security of enslaved populations. Regional newspapers, while carefully avoiding any suggestion that enslaved people were capable of such sophisticated planning, reported the incident as a tragic accident involving contaminated food. The Richmond Enquirer described it as a mysterious tragedy that has befallen one of our most productive agricultural enterprises, while the Staunton Spectator speculated about unknown toxins that may have infiltrated the plantation's food stores. Behind these carefully neutral public accounts, however, private correspondence among plantation owners revealed deep anxiety about the implications of the Belle Grove incident. Letters preserved in family archives speak of increased security measures, changes in food preparation protocols, and heightened surveillance of enslaved medical practitioners throughout the region. Sarah's act of resistance changed slavery throughout Virginia and inspired future freedom fighters. Make sure you're subscribed to learn more about these hidden heroes who refused to accept bondage. Sarah herself lived for another 15 years after the poisonings, continuing to serve as Belle Grove's healer while maintaining absolute silence about her role in the overseers' deaths. Her reputation for medical knowledge actually enhanced following the Christmas incident, as both enslaved and free people sought her expertise in matters of health and healing. During these final years, Sarah trained several younger women in the traditional African healing practices that her grandmother had taught her, ensuring that this knowledge would survive even after her own death. She was particularly careful to pass down information about which plants and minerals could be dangerous, framing this knowledge as safety information while secretly preserving the tools of resistance for future generations. The transformation of Belle Grove's management structure following the poisonings inadvertently created better conditions for the plantation's enslaved population. The new overseers, lacking the intimate knowledge and established terror tactics of their predecessors, found themselves forced to rely more heavily on incentives and less on pure brutality to maintain productivity. This shift did not represent genuine improvement in the fundamental injustice of slavery, but it did demonstrate how individual acts of resistance could create ripple effects that benefited entire communities. Sarah's carefully planned revenge had eliminated not just 6 cruel individuals, but had disrupted an entire system of oppression. Word of the Belle Grove poisoning spread through the underground networks that connected enslaved communities across Virginia and neighboring states. While the details were often embellished or distorted in the telling, the core message remained consistent. Enslaved people possessed both the intelligence and the courage to strike back against their oppressors when the opportunity presented itself. Frederick Douglass, writing years later about the psychology of slavery, would observe that the slave who dares to speak the truth to his master's face, or who refuses to accept punishment without resistance, has taken the first step toward freedom. Sarah's actions represented this principle taken to its ultimate conclusion, the complete elimination of those who sought to crush human dignity through systematic cruelty. Modern historians have struggled to document cases like Sarah's because enslaved people understood the necessity of maintaining absolute secrecy about such acts of resistance. The absence of written records does not indicate the absence of resistance, but rather demonstrates the sophisticated understanding that survival required both action and silence. Archaeological investigations at Belle Grove have uncovered evidence of the complex herbal knowledge that enslaved healers possessed, including remains of plants that could serve as both medicine and poison. These physical traces provide silent testimony to the hidden world of resistance that existed alongside the more visible structures of plantation agriculture. The story of Sarah of Belle Grove represents more than an individual act of revenge. It exemplifies the unbreakable human spirit that refused to accept dehumanization without resistance. Her carefully planned destruction of 6 overseers demonstrated that enslaved people possessed not only the desire for freedom, but also the intellectual capacity and emotional strength to wage sophisticated campaigns against their oppressors. Sarah's courage reminds us that the fight for human dignity has always required extraordinary sacrifice from ordinary people. Subscribe to this channel and share this video to ensure that stories like hers are never forgotten. Her legacy lives on in every person who refuses to accept injustice and chooses to fight back against oppression. The poison she wielded was more than a weapon. It was a declaration that no human being should live in chains, and that sometimes the greatest acts of love require the ultimate acts of resistance.